But restoring your right to think before or during what you are doing is what GHL Business Launch exists to protect. So here's what we're going to cover today. The word agency has at least 5 meanings in our context. We're also going to talk about adjacent roles that add nuance and flavor to the conversation. We're going to talk about how people get hurt, not maliciously, but unintentionally by the system because of the words have meaning. The word have different meaning. We're going to talk about why this matters more or upstream of or before pricing and offering tools. That's why I realized over the weekend that I needed to actually have this as a formal training session. And we're going to conclude with what to take you with you, because I told you there's no action required, but there is a takeaway. There is a, what do I do about this? How do I process this? So with all that framing in place, here's what I want to slow down, how I want to slow things down and get specific. The problem isn't that people are careless with responsibility. It's that they're using a single word to describe very different roles and then acting surprised when expectations don't line up. And the word is agency. When most people hear it, they think they know what it means. But depending on the context, it can mean entirely different things. Sometimes it means execution. Sometimes it means representation. Sometimes it means judgment. Sometimes it means a business structure. And underneath all of that, there's an even more basic meaning that almost never gets named. It's the responsibility you have to yourself as a thinking person. When those meanings get collapsed together, people don't just get confused. They end up accepting responsibility that they never consciously chose. So what I want to do next is not argue for or against any of those meanings, because they are valid meanings. What we're going to do is separate them, not to decide which one is better, but to make it possible for you to hear what the other person might be hearing when you say a word, or hear what alternate meanings they might be implying when they use the word. And therefore, what responsibility they might be assigning to you as a result of one or both of you using the word. We are going to deliberately walk through these meanings one at a time and slowly. No decisions required, no identity change implied, only clarity. Before we talk about business roles, we have to talk about something more fundamental. Because none of the roles that I'm going to be describing are ethical or sustainable unless the 1st layer of understanding is intact. Layer 0, moral and psychological agency. Agency, at its most basic level, is the right and capacity to think, choose, and refuse on your own behalf. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to not know yet. You are allowed to question authority. You're allowed to say no to responsibility that you don't understand. And it's very important to realize this is a fundamental portion of maturing. Losing this kind of agency rarely looks dramatic. It's almost always very subtle. It usually occurs because compliance is rewarded as if it is progress. Level zero definition of agency matters a lot in this space that revolves around HighLevel because the younger economically constrained operators are the ones who are most exposed. The systems assume a shared context that is masked by the immediate access globally afforded by Facebook, but the actual context, the systemic context, many people don't. Many people fail to have, not again, not through a fault of their own. Many people don't have the context that is implied by the access. There we go. When thinking is punished and acting is rewarded, the very first thing that rewards, the, the very first thing that erodes is level zero self agency, self responsibility. This is the layer of definition of the word agency that GHL Business Launch is explicitly designed to protect. This is why I, until this weekend, intended, thank you for the likes, people. Until this weekend, I intended to leave this as a underlying theme, a framework, a framing of the frameworks, and a couple conversations revealed to me, I would submit the universe, the divine, this whatever you want to, whatever spiritual belief you have, revealed that instead of being implicitly protecting this core value, it was necessary for GHL Business Launch to explicitly protect this core value. You have a right to say no to responsibility that other people are imposing on you when you don't know the context or the expectations that come with that responsibility. When you don't have the capacity to the freedom to say no, when you are constrained in a way that obligates you to say yes when it's not the right choice for you. Okay. Layer one, and that's deliberately layer zero, is the moral, ethical meaning of the word agency. Agency for self. And then we have layer one, agency as response for yeah, that's Layer one agency is responsibility for self. It's choosing the opportunities that you will lean into. It's when you choose to offer it's the idea that when you choose to offer something to the marketplace, you're responsible for understanding the consequences of that choice. Level zero is you have a right to protect your personal self. Level one is when you choose to operate in the public environment, you have responsibility for accepting consequences of the choices you're making. But if you don't know what the meaning or the implications of the choices of the offer you're making, you cannot do so. You cannot make that offer fairly, justly. Because this is not about competence, it's about consent to responsibility. You may be totally competent to provide that service, but if the other person imposes a expectation on you that isn't what you intended, that is unjust expectation. Most of us want opportunities before we're actually ready. Most of us seek income before clarity. In the high level world, that's often talked about in terms of niche. Pick a niche because your income will be you'll have more control over your income if you're a specialist expert in a niche. We want that. When we want the income, we would rather not have to be responsible for seeking clarity. Most of us want authority. We want to present as authoritative before we actually have access to the tools, assets, and skills and knowledge that grant us that authority. In fact, choosing not to accept responsibility is still an agency. It's demonstrating that I know that I'm not ready to offer this thing. You don't have to you do not have to assume responsibility just because someone else expects it of you. Agency makes that responsibility real when you knowingly accept it instead of having it imposed on you by someone with a higher power grading. Then we have layer two. Layer two is agency as execution. This is we do the work for you. This is about deliverables, timelines, outputs. Authority limited to the task completion. Liability is operational. The client is saying, take this off my plate. And this is honest, legitimate work. Problems only arise here when execution is mistaken for judgment or authority. When the client says, take this task off my plate, but then expects you to solve why the task is important. When they start evaluating you based on the results of your task, so this often looks like build me a new landing page, build me a website, build me a funnel, and you deliver that execution, and then the client questions why they're not getting the sales from the funnel. Well, that wasn't your response. You didn't agree to the responsibility of result. You agreed to deliver the deliverable. Deliver the deliverable. I was redundantly saying again. Layer three, agency as representation. We will act on your behalf within defined bounds. This looks like lawyers and financial planners and outside the marketing space, lawyers, financial planners, powers of attorney. We act on your behalf within defined bounds. We represent you with the insurance agency. In the marketing space, it's you go negotiate it's the media buyer. There's a good one. You have been granted authority to make decisions on behalf of the client in the client's absence. In order for this to be just, fair, ethical, authority must be explicitly granted. Where risk increases here is if interpretation is allowed to enter the equation. Because the client is expecting you speak for us when we're not in the room. If the boundaries are vague, you might think you have more or less authority than the client is expecting. Competence does not automatically confer permission, neither does skill or effort. Only what agreement is between the two of you over what is the boundaries of the authority. And if it's not explicit, almost always the reason this becomes risky is people have misaligned expectations. And the failure mode here is you get blamed for decisions that you thought you were supposed to make and you were never authorized to make. Layer 4 of agency is judgment. This is help us decide what matters. This is the client asking you to make assessments within your professional lane about trade-offs, prioritization, and where to draw boundaries. Outcomes might be discussed because you're talking about trade-offs, but outcomes at this point don't have to be guaranteed because you're sharing responsibility for making a decision. This is often where mispricing originates. Because judgment carries responsibility without certainty, and you're incurring a liability that may be measured financially by the client. And if you're assuming responsibility, then you should be justly compensated for that responsibility. You should never be asked for judgment without being given authority, access, and protection. And yet many people who are operating in the previous layers, layer 1, layer 2, are being expected to provide advice for how to do the thing or why to do the thing. And this mismatch is where the harm accumulates. Again, not maliciously, not intentionally, but systemically. Last week, we talked about it as the vague, you're my marketing guy zone. Maybe it was the week before, whenever it was. Layer 5 of agency is what people hear when they see the word agency written on a page. When they hear the word, this is what they think. This is what they default to thinking. Agency is a business structure and access to a set of tools. And it feels like I am or I am not operating as an agency if I have or don't have access to a particular set of tools who shall remain nameless, but whose initials rhyme with HighLevel. Oh, wait. Oh, well. An agency as a business structure has legal and structural identity. It has contractual expectations. In order to operate effectively, it must have access to the correct set of tools. In our world, that's a subscription to HighLevel, but it could just as easily be ClickFunnels, Salesforce, HubSpot, um, Podium, Circle. It should have the ability to have access to the tools in a test environment, in a protected space, without using the client's resources as a testing ground. It also must have access and visibility into the systems of the client that you're responsible for. Responsibility without that access is theater. We'll actually talk about the context that it might be valid, but if it's agency, then it requires access to act on behalf of. Because you cannot be responsible for outcomes that you can't test, observe, improve. Again, here's where harm comes in. You might be acting as an agency or have the expectation of behaving as an agency, even if you never use the word agency to describe yourself. Other people might hear your description of what you provide and what you offer and hear, oh, they are going to be my agent. Again, that vague, you're my marketing guy zone. That confusion in language doesn't protect you from the consequences. Being clear about the language and the layers of responsibility is essential to manage your agency for yourself, the level 1, level 0 levels.